All right, we are live.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. All right. This I think is we're starting to get into like the meat and potatoes of what I really want to talk about today. Because I want to move faster as an organization, and to move faster, we have to adapt faster, right? And to adapt faster, we need to know what's going on that doesn't work. And so giving each other, whether that's up or down in the chain of command, I guess you'd call it, giving and receiving feedback the right way and for the right reason is one of the most important things we're going to do. So this is super important. Please focus, turn your brains on, and we're going to have a very good discussion about this. I'm really excited about this one. So let's dive in, and then I will feed you and then stuff your brains with more fluff, okay? So let's get right into this one.
Excellent.
Giving and receiving feedback.
I'm very excited for this one. I've been reading a book called Thanks for the Feedback, about halfway through, and it has been illuminating on not only the art of giving feedback, but more importantly, receiving feedback, and some ways to identify some of our difficulties in receiving feedback, and then how to kind of change that. You're going to get a very bird's eye overview of this topic, and then we're going to spend a lot of our trainings kind of diving a little bit deeper into this as we go, but you're not going to get all of that today. Love this quote: receiving feedback does not mean I am the worst person that ever lived. It only means that someone cares enough to tell me how to improve. So if we're not actually giving you feedback, especially if you ask for feedback and we don't give it to you, that's not a very good thing.
That's a red flag.
That's a pretty big red flag. We care about you guys a lot, and that is why you do get a lot of constant feedback from us, both positive and maybe a little bit critical, helping you improve. There are 3 types of feedback, and if you think about feedback that you've received, you can probably put it into one of these 3 categories. So there's evaluation feedback. It tells you where you stand. It's kind of like your performance review, things like that. Sometimes it contains some judgment. It's not bad. Coaching is aimed at improving your knowledge, skills, meeting challenges, and it identifies a problem in behavior. And appreciation is being seen and understood and motivates us. So we're going to dive into each of these a little bit deeper. So evaluation, it tells you where you stand. It's how you rank or how you're doing in relation to expectations and to other people. Your report cards, performance reviews, medals, even nicknames are all a form of evaluation. It aligns expectations. So evaluation is usually between 2 different people. In your performance review, when you sit down with your manager, it lets you know what your manager is expecting from you. It clarifies consequences. Your performance reviews often determine your raise, and we try to be pretty clear in that. And it guides decision making. So we decide whether or not to apply for the new position based on our understanding of how much our managers currently value us. Having that evaluation knowledge will help you guide what you're going and how you move forward. Coaching helps you learn your strengths and your areas of improvement. So it allows you to improve, learn, grow, ask questions, meet goals, as well as create new goals. When you ask your boss for more direction, you are asking for coaching. So if you're coming up and saying, hey, what is the next step? You are asking us not to evaluate where you currently are, but you're asking us for that coaching and give you ideas on how to move forward. It can be sparked by the need to improve your knowledge or skills, or it can be triggered by someone identifying a problem in your relationship. And appreciation, it's about the relationships and human connection. On the surface level, appreciation says thanks. But on a deeper level, it also says, I see you. I know how hard you have been working. How many of you really like getting appreciation feedback?
I do.
Yes, you do. It motivates us, right? There's a human need to feel noticed, to feel valued, to feel appreciated. And we need to be hearing that on a constant basis. So everyone wants to feel seen and appreciated. It gives us a renewed determination to double our efforts. You work harder when you know that people are appreciating what you're doing. Often when people are asking for more feedback, what they are really asking for is more appreciation. They want to know that what they're doing matters. So keep that in mind as you're giving it. This was intriguing. What people need. We need, like, the numbers are quasi-made up. About 60% more appreciation, at 34% of coaching, and only a sliver of evaluation. If every day all we told you was where you stand, but never gave you any appreciation on how you're doing or guidance to get better, Are you going to feel fulfilled with that kind of feedback? Probably not. What we often get is 60% evaluation and only that 6% of appreciation. So as you are giving feedback, especially for those of you who are, well, all of you really are in positions of developing lower level teammates and helping them raise, keep this in mind that they probably need to hear they're doing a good job way more often than they need to hear how much they suck. So that was a brief overview of the giving of feedback side. Receiving feedback is what I want to focus on today and how we receive that. Pull beats push. You have to ask for the feedback. You have to come to someone and have that desire to learn more about how you can improve, because they're probably not going to just give it to you all the time. They're not going to push that on you. And if you don't receive feedback well, you're going to get less of it, because it's frustrating as someone giving this feedback to feel that defensiveness, to feel like it's not even being received well. You're going to end up getting less and less of it. So it doesn't matter how much authority or power a feedback giver has. The receivers are in control of what they do and don't let in, how they make sense of what they're hearing, and whether they choose to change. If we're serious about growth and improvement, we have no choice but to get good at learning from just about anyone.
I think this is really important, because just because you may be the program director or the head instructor does not mean that when one of your senior instructors comes in and says, hey, we have this problem, you should ignore them because they're not your senior. Because the honest truth is, Jennifer's probably not in the school at that moment to go, yeah, hey, we need to resolve. Like, you need to take that feedback from those people, and you need to take it at face value, and you need to take it without giving any reasons, excuses, complaining, etc. You need to be the example of receiving feedback for your team. You need to make sure that you are opening your ears and listening to what they have to say, regardless of whether they're a level 1, a level 3, or the owner.
Kind of bummed out that Mr. Taylor isn't here because I'm going to shout him out real fast. We were doing role plays. I think it was me, him, and Tanner on the upgrade process. And he was like, I get why you guys bring up the black belt and talking about that, but no one really knows what that means unless they've trained martial arts for a long time. He's like, what if instead we said, when a student is ready to make martial arts a focus in their life, they're ready for black belt club instead of do they want to get a black belt? And I was like, dude, you're a freaking genius, and you just got here.
And that's the beauty of different perspectives.
When a program director who doesn't have as much experience on the mat gives a head instructor some advice or suggestions on how to change up things on the mat, you can't just face value dismiss that, because half the time they actually are seeing that from more of a parent perspective. And it might be something that you really do need to change, and you're completely oblivious to it because you're right in the thick of things. You know how things are supposed to go. You've got your check mark, the checkbox is following the lesson plan, and they're seeing something that you've got your blinders on and you're not noticing. So don't dismiss feedback just because you don't think they have the authority or understanding to help you with that. Okay, this mouse is so sensitive. Okay, knowing your triggers. So this gets into receiving that feedback. We're going to take a minute and go through each of these, and I'm going to have you kind of write down some of your personal triggers. There are 3 types of triggers. Your truth triggers. The feedback is wrong, unfair, or unhelpful. So at the tournament, setting up sparring divisions, and I got a piece of feedback and I just got immediately defensive on it. We had this kid that was like this tall and these kids that are this tall in the division. I'm like, I know I did that right. I didn't screw it up. I wasn't wrong. I did it correctly. I don't know how we can even fix it. I don't even want to entertain a way to fix it because dang it, I did it right. And I don't know how this got screwed up so bad. And I even had to like pull it up and prove, see, I was right. I went back later and thought, well, that was the stupidest thing I've ever done. But
it happened in board breaking. There was a bunch of, I think it was in Division 8, which was the division I was in. It was like me, Seth, Quentin, or not Quentin, but it was a bunch of like these big kids, and then there were a few lot smaller, not a little lower level students who were trying to compete with.
Right, and they were definitely lower level, and it was like the same thing. I'm like, but I divided it by weight, and I couldn't have a class of 3, and we just had to do it and deal with it. oh, I was probably hitting a truth trigger. In my mind, the feedback was wrong. No, it was actually right. But have to step back and think about it. And we've now got to brainstorm better ways to do it. And if I'm not open to that, we can't actually change anything. Your relationships, I can't hear this feedback from you. Well, I'm not going to listen to you because you're my mom. I can't teach my kids piano. Not to save my life. Nope. I know a whole lot about teaching piano and a whole lot about music theory and everything, and never will be able to teach my children because they won't listen to me because I don't have the authority to do that with them.
Lex is currently a hairstylist, and she's like, how do I get more clients? Just as like a wanting to rant to me. And I went, I do that all the time. And she's like, I don't want to hear the karate way of doing it. And I'm like, all right, I'll just let you talk then. But it's like, I could have given feedback there, but she's like, she didn't want it from my
It's the wrong relationship.
It's like, she's like, I just want to complain. I was like,
Yep. Know the relationship and where things are. Identity. The feedback is threatening and I'm off balance. We're going to get into these a little bit more. So you're like, what in the world is she talking about? So your truth triggers. First, you have to understand. Before you can do anything with feedback, you have to understand it. It's harder than you think, and you need to ask the giver to clarify the feedback. See your blind spots. Like this quote, you don't have blind spots, but you know that your colleagues, family, and friends certainly do. Well, that's the nature of blind spots, right? Sometimes feedback that we know is wrong is actually wrong, and sometimes it's just in our blind spots. I would argue more often than not, it's probably just in your blind spot. You need to separate appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. The very first task in assessing feedback is figuring out what kind of feedback we're dealing with. You know, is it appreciation? Is it coaching? Is it evaluation? So broadly, feedback comes in those three forms. Often the receiver wants one type and gets another. This is also where some on the giving side and the receiving side, things get crossed. Let's say you've been working on your phone skills for a while and you show your manager how far you come. You're needing positive encouragement. You want them to say, hey, you know, it sounds like you were way more confident that time. Keep up the good work. But instead, they give you a list of 12 things that were wrong that you need to fix. Are you going to leave that situation feeling fulfilled? No, probably very frustrated because you thought you were doing good. You were going to them asking for some kudos and they said, oh, great. Yeah, I listened to that phone call. You need to fix this and this and this and this and this. On the other side, you might be wanting to get information on how to get better at that phone call. And instead they go, oh man, yep, that was great. It was solid. Let's move on. Keep it up. Same thing. You leave that situation feeling very unfulfilled. So we've got to get better at asking for what we want.
I was just going to say, I like how Caden does his feedback for us, is that he comes with us with feedback that we need to work on the mat to improve ourselves, but he comes with it as PCP. Mm-hmm. He still praises something we're doing really good at, and then he gives us a thing, and then praises us again. So it's that still thing, no matter who we are, we should still give that first praise to tell them that you are doing a good job, and then you give something that you need to work on.
Excellent.
One thing that I had to learn a long time ago with feedback is it is very important that when you're giving feedback and also when you're receiving feedback, that you're in the right frame of mind. Because I can come to you and try to give you, like, for example, last week at the tournament, did anybody ask you if you were ready to get some feedback?
No.
Give you any sort of suggestion? And
probably
you
wasn't
have
even
100 million things going on, right?
Not even really given as feedback necessarily, it was like, oh, well, that really should have been taken as such.
And so you weren't in the right frame of mind, and so immediately these blind spots start to appear, these triggers start to happen, right? And so if you are going to have a serious conversation around feedback, it is important and it is okay to go to someone and say, hey, Jennifer, do you mind if I share some feedback with you?
Absolutely.
And it's also okay to say, I am so freaking tired. The tournament blew my mind.
Not time to go
Talk to me on Monday.
Yep.
And I experienced that this week. I had scheduled a meeting with my boss at my full-time job, and I had scheduled it for Tuesday, and we had it on the calendar, and I knew it was a feedback conversation. I planned it like that was everything that I wanted. And I knew going into it that that's what we were doing. And I knew the feedback was coming, and I was okay with it. And she gave me the feedback and everything, and I knew what the feedback was going to be even. Like, I'd already I presented her all of the questions I wanted to ask her, so that everything was set up so that I could record it and then we could go back through it. She gave me the feedback, and I could have told you what the conversation would have been almost word for word. She finished giving me the feedback and she said, "Give me your raw emotion right now." And I lost it on her. And she said, "Jake, what happened?"
Mhm.
And I wasn't in the right frame of mind, because what happened Monday night, what happened Sunday, Monday, didn't set me up for success on Tuesday. And I wasn't ready. Now, was that fair to her? No. But she didn't know that.
Right.
And so we went into this conversation. She was prepared to give me this feedback, and she gave me great feedback, and feedback that would have prepared me for a lot of, and will prepare me, and I have it all recorded, and I can go back and listen to it, and we've had conversations since. But prepare yourselves. If you're not in the right frame of mind, like Caleb said, take that time and say, "Hey, not today." Be willing to
It's okay. Know what you want and know what you're getting.
My mom's favorite thing is McKay will go and pull out his legal pad and he'll write down my feedback on it. I'll go home, I'll show it to my parents, be like, "Look what I got." I am like beaming. I get so excited. I'm like, I gotta learn what I gotta fix. I get super excited about it. But like, even if I'm not in the mood for that feedback that day, it's nice to have it in writing, because then I can go and look at it later and I can go and look at the 3 points that I need to fix and add them to my, like, right before the next day.
Excellent. Then you're in a better state of mind to get that feedback.
Similar situation Thursday night. Jennifer was at Clinton, and I called her, and on my drive home, and for like 10 minutes after I got home, I was on the phone and I received really, really good feedback. We had a great conversation, and I go in and I just have a big smile on my face, just like Mike. And I'm like, I know what I need to work on.
Excellent.
And my parents are like, "Oh, sick. You must have called Jennifer."
I was worried it was going a different direction there for a minute. I was going, "No, did I crush your soul?"
On the flip side of that, being the one who is giving feedback, having it written down somewhere, because of like, hey, let's talk about feedback on Monday. I've done both, where I wrote it down and I was prepared. I've also been hey, I'm ready for my feedback, and I go, dude, that was over the weekend. I forgot everything I was going to tell you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Mhm.
I agree. There is a risk there for sure.
Also, like with like giving and receiving feedback, but also knowing just sometimes like you just need a vent. Like I feel like I and Caleb are really good about this one, because like I'll come home and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh," and like I'll just like say stuff to them, like good and bad, and like they just let me rant. And if it is a problem, they're like, "Okay, do you want me to fix it?" And I'm like, "No."
Right. That goes to the knowing what it is that you want. Do you want to just be told things are going well, like appreciation, or are you looking for that coaching, or are you wanting to see evaluation? And that kind of hits those truth triggers.
And so the reason we're doing this is I would like everyone to be more transparent about the moment that we're about to have feedback. If it's a head instructor trying to give one of their instructors feedback, if you're so tired or ornery that you don't want the feedback, or it's just going to make things worse, I would like you to be honest enough to tell us that.
Ask
And
us to
vice
write it
versa.
down.
If you're like, "Man, I would really like some things to work on," it's not very difficult to walk into your manager and say, "Hey, could we talk for 2 or 3 minutes about some things from today that you think I could be working on? Or even, could we review the goals that I was working on to see where I am at? I would like to know where I stand right now." And they may say, "Hey, I don't have time for that at this moment. Let's plan a time tomorrow." They may give you feedback right there, but I just want to have a more open conversation, which is why we started the day with, let's be open communicators. Let's be positive communicators, because that's leading up to, now can we have positive interactions all of the time, or most of the time? All the time's a little wishful, right? About feedback, because I want to accelerate the speed at which we give and receive feedback and then implement those changes, because I think this is one of the things that hold us back. Is some of us are gun shy about giving feedback, and some of us are gun shy about asking for feedback. Some of us are resentful when we receive feedback, and I really would like to clear all this up and really understand that we give feedback and we receive feedback because we're trying to support one another. This is a positive thing, and feedback is the best thing you can get from someone in a relationship, especially, I think, a working relationship, where there are defined tasks. There's absolutely things that need to be trained and taught and re-educated and modified all the time. So, sorry, continue. I just want to rant for a second, because this is so dang important that we can get over the stigma of, "Oh, they said I did this thing and now I'm either going to fight back or I'm going to go be sad about it. I want feedback to be a positive and energetic, motivational thing.
I actually started getting in the habit of like keeping notes, and then because I don't want to give feedback in the moment if I'm upset or if I'm like in the moment, so I have to come down. So like I started reading notes all the time, and I keep it with myself. So then when they're ready to talk and I'm ready to talk, then we're both at a little bit more calmer state.
Excellent.
I agree.
I-
Daniel, just a second. Sorry, Ashley.
Yeah. One thing that I do with Michael that he seems to enjoy, he likes, like he said, having it written down. I have a list of all the notes and feedback I've ever given to Michael, so that when I can go back and be like, hey, you fixed this. Great job.
Excellent. Then it gets good appreciation feedback.
I can wait a second, but it kind of was just.
No,
along
you're good.
the lines of, I think about this one thing a lot because I regret exactly how it happened. But that it's so important that when you're emotional about something, when you have like when there's something that you, especially if it's like a truth trigger or a relationship trigger, that you take a second before you give the feedback. Because like I think about this time I went up for a band thing at USU, and my boyfriend was there, and I was like went with his family and took time out of my weekend to do it, and he spent about 10 minutes with me, and he gave me a side hug. To him, he was like, "Great, that was a hug,
he was
right?"
in trouble.
And he's so
Boys, take note. Side hugs
so
are bad.
Like we had
on
the
the list.
entire drive home, right? That's like an hour and a half, and I sat in silence, and I hoped he would read my mind. I hoped he would realize what I was like, that I was mad. So I used a passive aggressive communication style. I gave him evaluation feedback later, and it triggered my truth, relationship, and identity triggers. And so when he dropped me off, he was like, he gave me a side hug again. Which I was like, all right, I might strangle this kid. He was like, you good? And I was like, I'm fine.
No.
And he gave me a call a couple hours later, and he was like, why do you keep saying you're fine? Because you seem upset. And so I went off with the evaluation communication style. I was like, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. And he goes, well, I felt like you were ignoring me the whole weekend. And I didn't even stop to think about like his thing, but I was so angry that there was like, I did not think about the feedback I was going to give him. I just wanted to let him know that a side hug was not okay. And that if that be a full hug next time, I go out of my way to go see him. And he was like, you know, we fixed it later. And it took a second, like 2 days before I went back to that conversation. And I said, I'm really sorry for what I did. But just taking the time before you bring something up so you're not in this like triggered state is so important. Because it's like, that can make or break, like that was a fight, and it could have not been a fight if I had used my feedback.
Hope, Tanner, and Brandon. Then we'll move on.
Okay, so I just want to point out Braxton. It was like 2 weeks ago, like last week. I was like having the hardest time because like one of my favorite students, like they didn't continue, and I was like weeping. It was so bad, you guys. Don't even laugh. And so, like, I was back for like freaking out, and Braxton's like, it's okay, and like he knew exactly what to do, and to be like, dude, get your butt on the mat. You've been off the mat for 1 minute. How dare you? Like, he was just like super calm out. And he was like, hey, take a minute. You're good. And I was like, do I look fine? He goes, dude, you look terrible. Like, fix it, you know? And we're like, I was good. And like, we hopped on the mat and we were fine. The way he acted was amazing.
Excellent. Kudos, Braxton. Your fiance is going to be lucky. Tanner.
Gonna be. She is. I'll pay no later.
I think it's always, well, there's this quote from Dave Kovar, it's in his book, that when you go through like any conference, it always needs to be from an unemotional, but caring standpoint. I think this is very important for feedback because if you give feedback from an emotional standpoint, all of a sudden it's like exactly what you know.
Yep.
So it always needs, just like we've been saying, you need to take a step back and then come back professionally and just give them feedback.
Absolutely.
We talk about the triggers as like a warning, and I also want us to make sure we think about it as you need to recognize this so that way you can help everyone be able to give feedback and receive the feedback. Because if I'm like, I know that every time I talk to McKay, he's going to give me good feedback, and I put that like label on everyone that, hey, if I'm going to talk to them, they're going to give me good feedback. It makes me more open versus like I have to be aware of making it a negative thing. We need to make sure
Right.
that it's also in a positive life of everyone can give me feedback versus like everyone can not give me feedback.
So that's why we're talking about the triggers. Once you can recognize your own triggers, it's way easier to separate that. I like to be right. I just do. And so
What?
I know, shocking. Everyone's so surprised. Bombshell right there.
You're always right when you make the rules.
That's why I make the rules. No, that's a truth trigger for me. If I hear that I am not right, defenses go up, walls go up immediately. And I know that's what happens. And so I can work on not allowing that to happen because I'm aware of it. So being aware of your triggers, and that's why we're discussing triggers for a minute. Your relationship triggers. I can't hear this feedback from you. We can be triggered by something about the giver, either their credibility or lack thereof, their trustworthiness or untrustworthiness, their motives or our perceived questionable motives. We can likewise be triggered by how we feel treated by that person. Whether it's reality or not, it is reality because that's the way you feel. So you got to kind of recognize that and think of your relationships with people. Who do you struggle getting feedback from? And it's probably not because they're terrible at giving you feedback. You probably have some of these blind spots up when it comes to getting feedback from them. So it's important to disentangle the feedback from the relationship. In practice, this can be extremely difficult because we almost always take up the relationship issues first and let the feedback issue drop. So the first kind of relationship trigger comes from our reaction to the other person. I don't like how I'm being treated, or I don't trust your judgment. You guys felt that sometimes someone comes up to you and gives you some feedback and you're like, well, you don't know what you're talking about, so I don't have to listen to you. Probably not the right response because they might really have some very valuable insights that if you would just listen, you would be able to improve. We can have these reactions even when the feedback itself has absolutely nothing to do with the relationship. You think the problem is me? Well, that's hilarious because the problem is very clearly you. Kind of to the, well, you think I was the problem? You gave me a freaking side hug, right? Feedback in relationships is rarely the story of you or me. It is often the story of you and me, and it's the story of our relationship system. With any feedback we get, there's always a relationship there between you and the feedback giver. So work to understand the feedback. What's the dynamic between the two of us, and what are we each contributing to the problem while you're going through that feedback? And then our identity triggers. The feedback is threatening and I'm off balance. So our identity is the story we tell ourselves about who we are. When we receive critical feedback, it can threaten that story. So before we even hear the rest of the feedback, we get super defensive and are gearing up to counterattack, or pass out because we're freaked out. Your truth triggers and your identity triggers will sometimes be entangled. I like to be right. I get told I'm wrong. That hits an identity trigger for me. So learn how wiring and temperament affect your story. We're all wired differently. So we deal with stress in very different ways. Knowing how you personally react to different situations and understanding your temperament gives you insight into why you'll react the way you do and why others don't react the way you think that they should. I don't understand why someone would just break down and cry. I think they should get mad, right? And that's what I would do. And you're super emotional. What's your problem? That type of a deal. Well, y'all are different. Dismantle your distortions. It's easy to take feedback and magnify it or distort it. Ashlyn's example she shared was very much magnified and distorted. He didn't mean anything at all by it. She blew it way out of proportion. Then the whole thing snowballed and escalated. An example, class is feeling lethargic. I need you to step up your energy. Simple bit of feedback to someone. But sometimes it would turn into, well, does my manager not think I'm even trying to, am I now a terrible person at teaching classes because I got this little bit of feedback because I thought I was doing everything that I could, which then leads to stressing over the interaction. You think about it all night long. You come back to class the next day. You're super mad about it. You're not in any mind frame to hear anything.
We had an employee that did that a lot when we would give them any sort of feedback, and then it was like a rescue mission. Every time we gave them feedback had to pull them back and be like, you're fine, you're great, you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we deliver a small bit of feedback, and they're like, and I was like, give me a headache just trying to talk to you, bro.
And that's what we're trying to avoid. Like, if we can't help you become better at what you do, and help you be more successful, and help you make more money, and help you inspire more students, we can't have you here, is the honest truth. And so at the end of this, we're going to brainstorm some. I'm about to give you feedback. How can we set up the conversation to end successfully for both parties? Kind of a practice, okay?
I don't know if I'm paraphrasing this one a lot, but it's like the pride is the downfall of man. Where I always have to go and think, I need to let go of my pride on this one. Like last week, I had, or not even last week, this was this week, I had McKay walk up to me and say, hey, you snap at Taylor, do not snap at people. I grew up training dogs, so sometimes getting people's attention, I do it the same way I train my dogs. So
Okay.
don't do that.
Okay.
Don't be snapping at people.
Because it can be misconstrued really
Yeah.
badly. I can seem like a jerk. So I had to go and think like, okay, I usually think of myself as a nice person. That makes me seem like a jerk. But I'm just going to say, yes, sir, I'm going to apply it immediately. And I thought about it that night. I was like, I'm going to fix that as soon as I can, because that's what a really good point.
Excellent. Jaden.
Like, it gets very, like, when I have an idea and I'm fully convinced it's right, and a lot of times there's nothing anyone can say that will be like, you're
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I understand, Jaden. I understand. I'm working on it really, really hard. Caden and Braxton.
Along the same line as Jaden's, a lot of the time, I mess up a lot. I do. I have since I was born. And sometimes when I mess up, I'll get angry at myself and try giving myself feedback. And then anytime somebody tries to give me feedback, I don't listen to it. It's not that I'm trying to be mean to them or don't want to hear it. It's just I've already given myself enough mean feedback. And so for a second, I'm just there like,
So you got to figure out how to separate.
And so now what I'm trying to work on when it comes to giving myself feedback and receiving feedback from others is taking a second to, number one, not be so mean to myself, and two, if I need to, let that person know, like, hey, I want to hear it. Give me a second, because I've never been really good at that. So
Braxton.
One of my favorite quotes from John F. Kennedy is, too often we enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. And I feel like it especially applies to the identity trigger.
Absolutely. Last one on identity, cultivating a growth identity. And a lot of you have heard of fixed mindset, growth mindset. We can see our identity as fixed. This is just how I am. Or we can have a growth identity. This is how I am now. Inside a growth identity, feedback becomes a welcome input rather than an upsetting verdict. I want you to take like 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, and in your notebook, write down some of your truth, relationship, or identity triggers. You know, are there... I would ask you to write down your blind spots, but they're blind spots, so
I don't really know that.
you're going to have a little bit difficulty doing that. Your relationships, are they people who trigger you when you try to get feedback, or when they try to give you feedback? Do they drive you nuts? Write down who they are. Write down names.
When you look at blind spots, though, there's a lot of times where you'll find a blind spot, and it's still a blind spot. Like you can't really fix it, but you work to fix it. So I think you can still kind of like.
Perfect. You might know what some of your blind spots are.
I also don't like to be wrong.
Yeah, it's a problem, Ash.
It's a problem. I don't either.
It's so hard.
Being wrong is I want to be perceived as being very competent.
Yep.
And then when I'm not,
My brother,
Yeah.
my brother's
I'm
the
an
same
idiot.
way. You know, but he's relentless about it, and the further he takes it a little bit further, and the more he tries to sound right about something that he's wrong, the more dumb he sounds. And it's not everybody like with that personality, but my brother specifically is freaking stubborn.
I've learned I'm frequently wrong, sadly.
Let's see what's next. What happened to my picture?
Oh no! Died. This is a good picture.
We're gonna fix that picture.
Monkey! You're on my ass.
All right, you can keep writing things down. Before we dive into this, I wanted to talk about some different types of feedback and asking for feedback and then knowing how to deal with that feedback. So I sent an anonymous survey out to you guys to get some feedback on your state of mind with things with the company and valuable information. You guys have some really great ideas for things that you would like to see improved. It's fantastic. There was a flaw. It was anonymous. I can't actually talk to any of you about your ideas or even to ask those clarifying questions into, well, how can I improve things? How can I get that feedback? How can we do things better? So, and one of the questions I don't even know is I entirely understand the answers that I put in the survey that I sent out, which makes it really hard to take that feedback. So on the knowing what you want and how to get it, you've got to know what questions you're asking. And if it's questions that are really going to need follow-up, make sure that you're asking them appropriately so you can actually have that follow-up conversation with people. So if you would like to talk about any of the feedback that you did in that survey, I would really love to chat with you. It would be great and helpful, and I would love to be able to have that open dialogue and maybe even implement some of those ideas that you guys had with the feedback that you gave. It was really great to see. I do like doing it anonymous as well because you were probably a little bit more honest, which is great. And that goes to when someone is asking you for feedback, please be honest with the feedback that you're giving them. It's why we're spending so much time on the receiving end of feedback, because if you don't receive feedback well, anyone who's giving you feedback is going to be scared to give you actual honest feedback because you don't react well to it. And how are you ever going to grow and learn from that? So fixed mindset versus growth mindset. This is probably the biggest part of being able to receive feedback well. Someone with a fixed mindset will avoid challenges. They refuse to receive criticism or feedback. Well, that just can't be true because I'm right. They focus on proving, there's a huge focus on proving yourself. You've got to prove that you're the best. You've got to prove that you're competent. You feel threatened by others' success. You can't accept failures or mistakes. You shy away from unfamiliar things, and you believe that talent is static. There was a very interesting study done. I don't remember, Dweck, I think, was the last name of the person doing it, right? Yeah. It was like this puzzle study with kids.
It was third graders.
Third graders.
And they took
Fascinating.
like several hundred third graders, and they gave them the same puzzles, and they were ever increasingly difficult puzzles, right? But they had two groups. One group, they kept telling them, you're so smart when they would
You're
succeed.
so good at puzzles.
You're so good at puzzles. And they fixed a image of themselves for these kids. They would give them the same feedback over and over again. The other group, instead of saying, you're so smart or you're so good at puzzles, oh my gosh, you worked so hard to figure that out. You pushed yourself. You just worked so dang hard over and over again every time they would accomplish it. And the difference between having the fixed mindset of I'm smart, which then crumbled immediately upon them not being able to complete one of the puzzles.
Then they would avoid them.
Then they would stop doing it and give up. Where the other group, where they were praised for their hard work, their continued determination to push through, would continue to try and innovate and solved several more puzzles on average than the other group.
And they wouldn't shy away from those puzzles. They relished the challenge because it gave them that opportunity to tackle something a little bit harder. The fortunate thing is if you have a fixed mindset, you can cultivate a growth mindset. We can make that change. I've tried really hard with my kids to not always say, well, you're just so smart. You're just so talented. You're just so good at this. It still happens on occasion. Many of you know Harrison, my oldest, brilliant kid. And we did tell him often that he was pretty smart because he is.
Basically a genius, but.
But that is part of his identity. And when he tackles something hard, it just about crushes his soul. Karate was really difficult for him. And so good for him. So good. Because it forced him to do something that he wasn't good at. He kind of sucked at it for a good long while. Oh, it's true. Absolutely.
He had a hard time. It was a totally different realm than what his brain was used to doing.
And he was used to always getting things right the first time. And always being really good at it. And always being top of his class. And it was really hard for him. College has been really hard for him because he hasn't been at the top of his class on a lot of things, and he just kind of gives up. He's finally graduating, and we're graduating, ending the college with, I think, C's. He might even fail a class. I'm just like, kid. Because it got a little bit hard and he didn't want to do it anymore. And because he didn't feel smart, then he just stopped attending class. What? He's got some work to do. Very much a fixed mindset. How many, you don't even have to raise hands. I just want you to self-reflect. Don't raise your hands. If you feel that you have more of a fixed mindset with a lot of things, that your identity is tied to how you feel, the feedback you get, that, well, I'm just a really good instructor and you have one bad day, well, now I suck and I can't do it. Versus the growth mindset, they'll view challenges as opportunities. It's that chance to get better. Oh, you telling me my class didn't go really well today? Bring it on. Wait till you see tomorrow's class. It's going to be amazing. You embrace constructive feedback. You focus on the process and not just the end result. You're inspired by other people's success. It doesn't threaten you. It's great to watch other people rise and grow and do well, because now you've got a challenge and something that you can work towards. You learn and you grow from your failures. You'll always step out of your comfort zone, and you believe that talent is ever improving. So how does having a fixed versus growth mindset relate to receiving feedback? Not giving feedback, but to your receiving of feedback.
When you receive feedback, you have a fixed mindset. You're like, this is who I am, this is how I am, and it often will like trigger truth or identity triggers, because it's like, well, I'm not going to change, I'm right. But if you have a growth mindset, it's like, okay, I can see how I can be better because of this feedback. So it doesn't like it. You might still feel the trigger of like, well, I thought I was right. But if you take a growth mindset, it goes, okay, I thought I was right. Maybe I wasn't. What can I do to change it? And so it makes your implementation of feedback and the way that you like feel after you take it so much better if you're not having a fixed mindset.
Absolutely. McKay, Jake, and Lorraine.
When I very first started working here, I was like fresher than fresh from Mr. Burke's school, and I'm sure some of you guys have heard some stories and stuff about how that place was, right? But I came in and I had a very fixed mindset on some of the things on how martial arts should be, especially around how a class should look and how technique should look and what a black belt meant. And that wasn't a very constructive or even healthy mindset for a lot of people, because the people that got a black belt at Mr. Burke's school were very, very good black belts. But the amount of people that just got drove out because they couldn't
Like 5 minutes or so, we'll be done.
personally in that environment was a very large number. And being able to move from a fixed mindset of like, this is how everyone needs to be and everyone one size fits all, to a getting a black belt is a personal journey and not everyone looks the same doing it, was something that was really hard for me. But on the other side of that, I feel like I became a much better instructor because of it as well.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to realize that most of our students are coming to us from everyday life where they're probably getting a fixed mindset. Because in public education, that's what they're taught.
Mm-hmm.
You're taught to be fixed mindset. You're not taught growth. Public education isn't taught you. It's not created to teach growth mindset. And so for us to be able to help teach these students every day about a growth mindset and help enlighten them on what that looks like is a huge area of opportunity for us to create future leaders and for us to really help these students progress beyond what their capabilities are.
Absolutely. Right.
Thing with people with fixed mindsets is if when you give them feedback, they're going to be expecting you to accommodate to them, because that's exactly what Ashlyn said. This is how it is. It won't change, and so they're expecting you to accommodate to them. Where in a growth mindset, it's a mutual thing, right? We're working together to come to a mutual understanding.
Excellent. Caden, Nate, Jackson, Ashlyn.
I was working with a student in a private lesson, several private lessons, training for a tournament. Connor Smith, blue belt, black belt club, absolute stud. And anytime I was like, "Oh, I want you to add this, or I want you to fix this, or this is doing great, or whatever it is," his default 2 words were, "It's hard." And I said, "Connor, stop saying that. You keep telling yourself it's hard. The only person who can stop you from being amazing is yourself. So I want you to take that out of your dictionary and throw it away. Instead, change it with challenging." And any single time I know that it's going to be a challenge for students, I say, this is going to be a really awesome challenge for you guys. It's going to be an opportunity for you to grow. And stuff like that is what McKay taught me is going to help create that growth mindset in the students early on. Because if we agree with them and we're like, oh, dude, it is going to be hard, right? But you still got to do it. And they're always going to be downtrodden on themselves and they're never going to believe that they can push past whatever it is that's hard, right? So changing that from hard to it's a challenge is going to change so many students' mindsets. So
I actually like to play on the word hard, and I acknowledge it. And I said, yes, it is hard, but I harp so much on the saying, like, but we can do hard things. Like, karate is hard, but we can do hard things. Because kids will always, like, forever have that moment of, this is hard, because, like, that's the easiest word for them to explain something that's hard. And so I go, but you, and so if I can train you to have the mindset, you can do hard things. When they face that, this is hard. Oh yeah, Sensei says I can do hard things, and it could be karate, it could be anything. So I like that with the challenging. But I for me, I just like, yeah, you can do it.
Just call it out.
It's hard, but then I had a story about Anthony. Now he's on the leadership team on the same thing. It's fine. Also with a fixed and growth mindset, a good example is like forms. And one example that was put on to me and some other instructor was the Masters Club bow staff form, right near the start where it's like up, down, left, right. Me and the other instructor thought it was left, right, up, down. But then McKay rewatched the high perform and was like, no, it's up, down immediately. And we're like, oh, shoot. Okay, cool, thank you. Which is more of a growth mindset, whereas a fixed mindset would be like, no, I'm right.
I was taught this way.
Yep.
That's the way I was taught. This is
Oh,
right.
we hear that a lot.
Just like that sentence.
I may have taught that once upon a time wrong. I might have been
It's a possibility. Ashland and Whitney.
I was like,
One thing that I just think is interesting and something we need to be careful of is that schools actually really do teach growth mindset, but they don't teach. They teach what it is and they teach like how to do it, but they don't even like enforce it or encourage it. Like they don't change what they're doing to create a better way for students to have a growth mindset. And so even if we're talking about a growth mindset with a student, we need to be really careful to make sure that we're providing them the outlet to have the growth mindset. Because otherwise it won't happen. They'll just know that a growth mindset is this and they won't do it.
Right. Give them that opportunity to actually implement and work on it.
One thing I wanted to ask is how to help kids with this thing is I had a couple students say I just can't do it. And I'm like, okay, can I help you break this down? They're like, no, I just can't do it. And so I want to know how to like help build onto that when they refuse to say I can't do it yet or want to learn how to do it.
It's a lot of questions. It's like, what about the technique can we do? Well, I can't do anything. And then so you break down each step. Is it the fold that's hard? Is it the keeping your hands up that's hard? Let's work from it ground up and kind of make sure they understand the full picture. Because students, when they're thinking of it as a full technique, can't do it. But if we break it down and have components, it's a lot easier for them to think about it.
And find that success for them so they have something that they're success at and then can build on that.
Yes, but also in the helping them break the habit of saying I can't do this. Mr. Burke used to always say can't do anything, and it was terrible English, but we'd say it all the time, and I don't ever say I can't do that anymore. This is like not part of my vocabulary because anytime I said it, it was like can't do anything. You're wrong about that part of it. We're gonna do this anyway. Let's go, right? And it wasn't. He didn't even let me entertain the idea that I couldn't do it, right? And I think we should provide that same opportunity for our students. Is like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Provide things.
There's a point at which the feedback can be, that's not true.
Provide things that challenge them.
That's not true.
I don't run. I didn't run.
Yeah, we had a whole conversation
running.
about that. She told me I
You
can't
bought a
one day.
freaking rower and then told me I couldn't even use it. I was not very happy with you.
Can't.
I had a proud moment yesterday during one of our classes. We were doing 540 hook kicks, and there's a student who really struggles with them, training them for months. She's a Masters Club. And I hear her across the room say, I can't do it. And I start walking over like, I'm about to tell you can. But then she says, yes, right? Like, I can't do it. Yes. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. So we had we had that little moment there. Like, look, you can't
Probably
do
just
it
say
yet,
yes.
right? However, you've worked hard to get where you are now. So I helped her recognize her efforts that she's put into it. She's got a basic foundation. And I'm like, let's keep working on this. Keep coming to Kicks and Tricks. Keep coming to demo team. We're gonna get this figured out.
Excellent. One more.
And then I have one last thing.
They say, I can't do it. I like to say, yeah. I say, how long does it take to go and build that skill? Like if they can't do a push-up, how long does it take to do a push-up? Well, you get better at that push-up if you keep on working on the muscle groups to go and try to do the push-up. If you try, you can do it.
Yep.
Amen.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, look at that cute man. I know.
Okay, so to end this, because lunch is sitting up there getting cold, I want to be very quick about this. But if you have feedback that you know you need to give to someone, how can you prime that conversation to go well from your point of view? And if someone approaches you with feedback, how can you make sure you're in the right frame of mind to receive it well? That's the last thing I want to talk about.
Okay, so this has a little bit of story, but sorry. When I was in high school and I was helping the middle school viola sections, I'd go in and help. Yeah, the teacher came to me afterwards and was giving me feedback on how I was teaching. I was, a brand new teenager. And she goes, could not, should. And I was like, what? And I was like, no, they shouldn't do it this way. They're doing it wrong. And she's like, yeah, but if you tell them should, they're just going to shut down. But if you say you could do it this way to get better, they're going to be more open to receiving feedback.
Softening the feedback.
Oh.
Okay. How do you start that conversation? So let's say it's Whitney noticed something that she needs to talk to you about. Like, how do you take that to someone who, has been doing this longer or whatever in the right, like, how do you set, just what I'm saying, how do you set that conversation up for success in both directions?
So we've got Tanner, Grace, Jaden, Brandon. Wow. Go Tanner.
Dibs.
I think putting the why, then backing up your what it is with the why, is like, it's just important because then I can't put it in words. Why is very
Explaining why the feedback
Give
is
them a reason.
relevant.
Give them a reason to listen.
With the core value align being so important, it's keeping that end goal in mind. We're all here for the same reason. So for any instructor talking to any person, it's like, I have some feedback that I would love to give you to help with the experience of classes, of the dojo. You can't say no to that.
Yeah.
But then following that up with, are you okay if I give that to you right now?
Yeah.
Are you in the right frame of mind to hear it?
Grace.
Just like in my brain, like I like it when it's super straightforward. Like I have feedback for you at the end of class. It's like it's happening.
Yeah.
And then I have some time to be like, okay, he's gonna give me feedback, and then I can get in that.
Be in the right frame of mind. Excellent. Jaden.
Turn on your growth mindset.
At the same time, as you're saying, I have feedback for you, and you're asking, hey, can I give you this feedback? When they say yes or no, be like, oh, is there a time where I could?
Yeah, follow up with it. Be respectful of them saying no. Don't just, if you ask, can I give you feedback? And they say, no, I'm not in the right frame of mind. Well, here's the feedback I have for you. That's not going to accomplish anything.
We have this a lot in K-Zone where we have students that have been there for a long time. They've learned something a certain way, especially in sparring. And I've had to have this conversation a lot, especially with advanced belts and some of our adults, where this is how we're going to teach it right now. You're more than welcome to use that when we actually apply it, but I want to teach you this. I want you to choose your method, especially for sparring. For forms, it's a little bit different. Usually I have to explain later on. It's going to be simpler because this is this way in another form. We're going to teach it this way, so we're not confused later on.
McKay, Nate, Brandon.
Yeah, when giving and receiving feedback, especially amongst the change in ranks, or I guess positions, making it very clear as the leader of the group or kind of up the chain, being like, I love receiving feedback because you guys see more and know more than I do in some areas. And if you have feedback on that, please let me know. I love Sam's feedback about the adult class because he's taken the adult class forever.
Mhm.
He's like, hey man, I feel like we're missing this thing. And I'm like, you're totally right. And I didn't even think about it because I wasn't part of that culture that he grew up in. Or not grew up in. He's grew up in karate
older
rinks
in.
Nate.
Sometimes I guess as head instructors in the moment when class is flying and people are, the transition of things and it's like in the split second I might give feedback like, hey, I need you to do this and this and this. I got an intro I got to do by. If you didn't like it in the moment, I didn't mean it like harsh. Or I don't know if other instructors feel that way sometimes too. But like if there's ever a moment that I just throw something at you, come talk to me after, and then I go, here's why. You probably didn't see this. Timmy was throwing up and I needed to teach an intro kind of thing.
And then maybe recognizing that you do have a tendency to do that.
Yeah.
Making it a habit to follow up at the end of class or their shift and talk to them about that. Whether they come to you or not, you know that it may have been perceived that way. Go ahead and have the follow-up conversation, be proactive. Brandon, then Caden, and then I think we got to call it.
Awesome. And then I was actually going to say building relationships and having a culture of what the expectation is going to be like. Because if you know that happens consistently, talking to your instructors before class as being like, hey, today we were super busy. I might give you feedback straight at how it is. If it makes you upset, we can talk about that after class. So that way the instructors know, okay, you know what? I didn't understand or I didn't agree. I know I can talk to Nate afterwards. And then also knowing how your teammates are, because I talked to Hope and I'm like, Hope, how do you want your feedback? And she's like, just tell me how it is. And I was like, awesome. If you asked me how I'd want my feedback, I'd be like, give me like a cookie first.
Yes.
Add some happy in with the feedback.
Balance your appreciation. You're probably like an 80% appreciation.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt because I know we have to be done. I just want you guys to now be open to the fact that you may get feedback and you may react negatively. And I would like you guys to be confident enough as you're giving feedback to say, hey, please don't get defensive. I was just trying to help. And I want you guys to start recognizing that sometimes in the moment we don't react the way we should.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like you to continue the dialogue, even if it's I'm sorry I upset you. I think this is really important. Could we talk about it tomorrow? Or whatever the case may be, because I want to work on opening the lines of communication. And I don't want this to be he gave me this mean feedback. And I don't want, and because we've had this happen before where we give feedback and it generates a negative response on a regular basis. And sadly, that person then is going to get less feedback because
they've set themselves.
They just you've set yourself up for not receiving more feedback, whether that's from a junior instructor, whether that's from your manager, from Jennifer. I want you guys to set yourselves up to be open. And then I also want you guys to be prepared for it didn't seem like that went very well. I think this feedback is really important. I would really like to revisit this so we can, so I can get my point across and we can come to some kind of understanding. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to get out to wrap this all up. Please be open to the feedback. If you are accidentally not open super well in that moment, be open to a revisit, please. Mm-hmm. And please keep an open mind. I just want to grow and I want to grow faster.
One final thing I'd love to add is on the, instead of pushing feedback, pulling feedback thing as well. Shout out to Hannah. She came and worked with us. What was that, Wednesday? And then after her shift, she's like, hey, how did things go today? You got any feedback?
Awesome.
And I was like, I had feedback, but then you were gone by the time you left. And then I forgot I was even going to tell you. And then you reminded me, sweet, here we go. And I had some things to work on and some things that she did well as too. But I don't think we would have had that moment had she not asked. We would have forgotten.
Right.
And that is a good way to wrap it up. Please ask for feedback.
Yep. Please.
Please ask for feedback. And I would really appreciate it if you would ask for what kind of feedback you would like.
Yep. That would also be
how
fantastic.
did things go today? To me, sounds like let's get some positives, but at the end of the day, we're going to do a little bit of evaluating.
One more tiny bit to that. If you're giving any coaching, you have to start with evaluation. Evaluation always has to come first. You have to know where you stand, or you spend the receiver spends the whole time listening to the coaching, going, well, am I doing a good job? I don't know if I'm doing great. Does he think I'm stupid? Does he think I can't do my job? So start it. You're doing a really good job with this. We're going to give you some feedback on this. Make sure there's some evaluation.
So if you don't understand something, ask. Let's go eat.
Fantastic.
Food.
All right.